So welcome to the next in our online series of messages brought to you by the Friends at Center Congregational Church in Lynnfield, Massachusetts. This is Reverend Tom Bentley, the pastor, hoping that these messages can help you in your journey of life. If you'd like to know more about Center Congregational Church, there'll be some information for you at the end of this video. So thanks for spending time with us. So grace and peace to you from our friend Jesus. Life is a journey, I often say. It's a matter of watching change happen and living into those changes. It's patterns, it's rhythms, it's filling up and emptying. It's being born, and yes, it's dying. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has that dynamic. Jesus speaks to the folks in this reading from Luke. He talks about putting so much stuff into our lives, there's no room for God. Let's take a look at what he said. Speaking to the people, he went on, "Take care, protect yourself against the least bit of greed. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot." Then he told them this story. The farmer of a certain rich man produced a terrific crop. He talked to himself, "What can I do? My barn isn't big enough for this harvest." Then he said, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll gather in all my grain and goods, and I'll say to myself, 'Self, you've done well. You've got it made and can now retire. Take it easy and have the time of your life.'" Just then God showed up and said, "Fool, tonight you die, and your barn full of goods, who gets it?" That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God. Life's changes, that's what we have here, filling up and emptying out. In pondering this message, an image came to me from my study of geology. It's called pseudomorphism. It's when there's a crystal in the ground and it has accumulated over eons. Maybe it's silicate, which would make it quartz or some other mineral, and often they're beautiful and semi-precious stones, these crystals, shaped in a certain way based on the interior structure, the atomic structure of the element. Along comes some material like water that begins to dissolve what's in this crystal as it's held compact by the rock around it. And then something else moves in to displace what was the space that the water dissolved into emptiness. And when the miners come, they find something that looks like a crystal, but it isn't really a crystal anymore. It's shaped like it, but it has very different chemical qualities. I think of, for instance, a beautiful crystal, aragonite. Aragonite is primarily a calcium substance, but when it goes through this pseudomorphism, it ends up as calcite, which is an inferior and sort of more fragile material. This notion of pseudomorphism describes what happens in our own lives. As we start out, we fill up with stuff, don't we? Father Richard Rohr calls this time of life, this first half, the time ruled by performance principle. Paul the Apostle spoke of it too as the time of the law. We fill up with stuff. We fill up with ideas. We fill up basically with ego. We create metrics to understand our world, and slowly we push away what was originally there. I suggest what was originally there was the pure grace of God. We knew in our early years as a child. I don't call for any going back to that naive vulnerability, but there was a purity, a connection to the vulnerability of life and the divine presence of love in our life, and we put things in the way. we accumulate things, like the farmer who had so much stuff, that's where his focus was, not on the wider things. He had filled up with something other than God, Jesus tells us. He was filled with greed. How often that can happen. But eventually all these internal structures, these things we make of ourselves, they begin to fall apart. This is what happens when one gets older, or when one encounters conflicts, losses, trauma. The convenient things that we have accumulated really don't seem to serve a purpose other than, at that point, the purpose of getting in the way. We have to start giving it up. It's really a cycle of eternal return, of birth, whereas a child, we're granted the full access to grace in those early years filled with, no longer do we have a memory of that time, but we know in some deeper way how we were present to the utter miracle, the utter connective of all things in life. And then we sort of get in our own way, and we go through life picking up a lot of stuff, ideas, self-inflating things as we build this ego. Now, it's necessary to have an ego, but ultimately we're overstuffed with it. And when it begins to fall apart, when we get older, that's the opportunity, actually. We can begin to let in the grace of God that waits to be readmitted. Pastor Juanita Campbell Rasmus writes about this in her own faith journey. She was reared in a conservative evangelical church, a Protestant, and it was a rules-based experience of God. Rules alone had left me hollow inside, but the sense that the Spirit was freeing me to be in relationship was so life-giving that all I could call it was joy. Something about this new awareness began to fill some of the emptiness that I had been feeling. I have found that relationship with God and my practice of abiding with God, being joined with God, are what make me solid inside and out. Perhaps the word love best describes what seemed to be flowing into me. Yes, a deep knowing that I was loved. This is a transformation that she's writing about. She felt empty, boxed in to a situation where God was all about intellectual rules. When that began to fail her out of a necessity, she began to let in the grace of God. And now she does that more intentionally in her faith experience and her spiritual life. We're invited to do the same. Jesus calls us out and he says, empty your barns and make room for God again. Empty the stuff, make room for God again. And so it's interesting. We start with that crystalline love of God already in place. And then it gets dissolved by the toxicities of life, the necessity of suffering. And then what's in place of all that pure good, beauty, and grace is really an inferior material. We have to get rid of it. We have to flush it out. Let in the grace of God that we have displaced. Let in the divine that we have displaced. We can do that and be transformed and reunited with the love of God we can know through Jesus Christ. In his name, amen. So thank you again for spending time with us. If you'd like to know more about Center Congregational Church, you can go online at center-church.org. And of course, we'd always love to hear from you. You can call us at the phone number provided above or the email address provided. So peace and best wishes in your journey. Goodbye.